The Andorian fist smashed into the helpless Zorian's face with a sickening crack, blood splattering the street as the human named Billy Ward watched in disbelief. But this was no bar fight or back alley brawl. This was a uniformed Andorian military officer brutally beating an innocent civilian in broad daylight. In that moment, as the Zorian whimpered and cowered, something inside Billy snapped. He had seen too much during his tour of duty on planet Zoran, part of the oppressive Andorian Empire. The arrogant Andorians, lording over the subjugated alien races they deemed inferior. The seething resentment from the populace, the tensions ready to explode at any provocation. But now, witnessing this cruelty with his own eyes, Billy could no longer stand by. "Hey, asshole!" Billy shouted, storming towards the Andorian. "Pick on someone your own size." The Andorian officer, Boron, turned to sneer at the human, not recognizing the fury in Billy's eyes until it was too late. Billy's fist collided with Boron's jaw, sending the Andorian elite crashing to the ground in a heap. The gathered crowd let out a collective gasp. A human had just struck an Andorian officer. This was unthinkable. Struggling to his feet, Boron wiped blue blood from his split lip, glaring at Billy with unbridled hatred. "You'll regret this, human," he spat. "You and your pathetic race." It was a regret Billy would soon feel deeply as the repercussions spiraled out of control. Boron twisted the story, painting the humans as savage brutes, turning the isolated incident into an excuse for total war. Blind with rage and wounded pride, the Andorian Emperor Zorath gave humanity an impossible ultimatum: flee Andorian space or be destroyed. Despite Billy's desperate pleas to his superiors that this was all a misunderstanding, that he had only been defending an innocent soul, the human forces had no choice but to retreat in the face of Andorian military might. But there would be no escape. Zorath's armada pounced on the withdrawing humans like a predator tasting blood. The massacre was swift and brutal. Human ships burst into flames, lives snuffed out by the thousands as the Andorian warships tore them apart. It was a slaughter, not a battle. Billy barely made it out alive, his heart heavy with the knowledge that his impulsive act of justice had sparked this catastrophe. Limping back to Earth, the ragged remains of the human fleet found not a hero's welcome, but looks of shock and disbelief. Zorath's chilling declaration of genocide against mankind spread like wildfire. The Andorian betrayal stung deep. The high ideals of friendship and cooperation between the two races now seemed a foolish fantasy. As a traumatized humanity struggled to process this new reality, to prepare for the invasion already underway, Billy nursed a bitter resolve. This was a war they could not afford to lose, a war for survival itself. Billy silently vowed to find a way to defeat the Andorians, to make them pay for their cruelty and arrogance. But first, he would need to rally a broken human race, to convince them to fight, to stand as one against the Andorian onslaught. The alternative was too terrible to imagine: the extermination of all mankind, an entire species snuffed out like a candle. The Andorian fleets were coming. Time was running out. When humans get angry, the galaxy cowers in fear. But would it be enough to save them from annihilation? Billy's return to Earth was not the triumphant homecoming he had once imagined. As he stepped off the transport, his battered body still aching from the brutal fight with Boron, he was greeted by a sea of somber faces. The weight of guilt pressed down on him, threatening to crush him like a black hole. It was his impulsive act of justice that had lit the spark of this war, a war that had already claimed countless human lives. He was quickly ushered into a secure briefing room where Earth's top military brass awaited him. At the head of the table sat General Thaddeus Ironside, a grizzled veteran with a face etched by the trials of 100 battles. His piercing gaze seemed to bore into Billy's soul as he recounted the events on Zoran and the subsequent Andorian onslaught. "They won't stop," Billy said, his voice raw with emotion. "The Andorians, they mean to wipe us out, every last one of us. I saw it in their eyes, the hatred, the cruelty. We have to fight back. It's the only way." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, some arguing for surrender, others for retaliation. But General Ironside silenced them all with a single raised hand. He stood, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the table. "Commander Ward is right," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The Andorians have made their intentions clear. This is a fight for our very survival. We won't go quietly into the night. We'll make them bleed for every inch of space they try to take." He turned to Billy, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Commander Ward, you've seen the enemy up close. You know their tactics, their weaknesses. I'm putting you in charge of a special operation, a strike team to hit the Andorians where it hurts, cripple their war machine from within." Billy nodded, a fire igniting in his chest. "I'll need men, the best we have. This won't be easy." "You'll have them," Ironside said. "Handpick your team. Whatever resources you need, they're yours. We're counting on you, Commander. The fate of humanity rests on your shoulders." As the meeting adjourned and the brass filtered out, Billy lingered, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Andorian fleet was coming, a tide of death and destruction that threatened to engulf them all. But they wouldn't face it lying down. They would fight, tooth and nail, until their last breath. The first blow came sooner than expected. Alarms blared as the Andorian vanguard dropped out of warp at the edge of the solar system. Earth's defense fleet scrambled to meet them, a ragtag assortment of ships against the gleaming might of the Andorian armada. In the chaos of battle, Billy and his team slipped aboard a crippled Andorian battlecruiser. They fought their way through the corridors, past the bodies of fallen Marines, to the pulsing heart of the ship, the warp core. But as they prepared to deliver the killing blow, a figure emerged from the shadows. Boron, his face twisted with rage, lunged at Billy, a gleaming blade in his hand. They clashed in a whirlwind of fists and fury, the fate of worlds hanging in the balance. Billy gained the upper hand, his fist poised for the final strike, but he hesitated, the memory of that fateful day on Zoran flashing through his mind. That moment of mercy cost him dearly. Boron lashed out, his blade finding flesh, before fleeing into the bowels of the ship. Bleeding but unbowed, Billy staggered to the warp core. With a final defiant roar, he unleashed hell, the explosion ripping through the Andorian fleet like the wrath of an angry god. The price was high, the lives of his Marines, men and women who had followed him into the jaws of death. But the blow was struck. As the Andorian ships reeled, fire blossoming from their hulls, Billy could almost feel the tremors of shock and anger rippling through their ranks. And on the distant Andorian homeworld, a name began to circulate, whispered, with a mix of fear and loathing. Billy Ward, the human who had dared to strike back. But for Billy, limping back to Earth in a battered escape pod, the taste of victory was bittersweet. The Andorians would return, their fury redoubled, and the war was not nearly finished. As he looked out at the stars, he knew that his fight, humanity's fight, was just beginning. Billy Ward stood before the mirror in his quarters, examining the fresh scars that crisscrossed his body. Each one told a story of survival, of defiance in the face of annihilation. He pulled on his uniform, now adorned with the insignia of humanity's last hope. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter!" he called out. General Ironside strode in, his face a mask of relentless drive. "Commander Ward, I have a new mission for you, one that could turn the tide of this war." Billy straightened, meeting the general's intense look. "I'm ready, sir." "We need intel on Andorian war preparations. You're going deep into enemy territory." Billy nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "I'll need a team." "Choose whoever you want. This is a high-risk operation. Make sure they know what they're signing up for." Within hours, Billy had assembled his team. Sergeant Max Mad Dog Briggs, an old comrade with nerves of steel, was his first pick. They gathered in a hangar bay, standing before a sleek Andorian scout ship. "Gentlemen, meet the Shadowfang," Billy said, patting the hull. "She's been outfitted with our best stealth tech and human weapons. She'll be our ticket into Andorian space." The team worked through the night, familiarizing themselves with the alien vessel. As dawn broke, they launched, slipping past Earth's defensive perimeter and into the inky void of space, Days passed in tense silence as they navigated Andorian patrol routes. Billy's heart pounded as they narrowly avoided detection time and again. Finally, they reached their target, a massive Andorian shipyard. "Holy shit," Briggs whispered, peering at the sensor readouts. "They're churning out warships like there's no tomorrow." Billy's fists tight. "Then let's give them a tomorrow they won't forget." They infiltrated the shipyard, donning stolen Andorian worker uniforms. Billy led his team through winding corridors, planting explosives at key junctures. Just as they finished sabotaging the main reactor, alarms blared. "We've been made!" Briggs shouted, raising his weapon. A squad of Andorian security forces rounded the corner, led by a familiar face. Commander Boron, his eyes blazing with hatred. "Ward," Boron roared, "this ends now." The shipyard erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Billy's team fought desperately against overwhelming odds. Men fell on both sides, their screams drowned out by the cacophony of battle. Billy and Boron clashed once more, their bodies slamming against metal walls as they grappled. Billy's fist connected with Boron's jaw, sending the Andorian reeling. But Boron countered, his clawed hand raking across Billy's chest. The ship shuddered as the first explosions ripped through its bowels. Billy knew they were out of time. With a final surge of strength, he activated his plasma torch, the searing beam catching Boron full in the face. The Andorian commander howled in agony, his flesh bubbling and burning. Billy didn't wait to see the result. He rallied his surviving men, and they fought their way back to the Shadowfang. They barely cleared the shipyard as it began to implode. Andorian pursuit ships screamed after them, weapons blazing. Billy's hands flew over the controls, pushing the Shadowfang to its limits. "We can't outrun them," Briggs yelled from the sensor station. Billy's eyes narrowed. "We don't have to outrun them. We just have to outsmart them." He piloted the ship into a dense asteroid field, using the space rocks as cover. The Andorian ships, unable to match the Shadowfang's maneuverability, peeled off one by one. As they drifted in the silence of space, making urgent repairs, Billy intercepted an Andorian transmission. His blood ran cold as he deciphered the message. "This isn't just a war," he told his battered crew. "It's an extermination. They're building an invasion fleet like nothing we've ever seen, and Emperor Zorath himself is leading it." They raced back to Earth, pushing the Shadowfang's engines to the breaking point. They arrived to find humanity mobilized for its final stand. Every ship, every soldier ready to fight to the last. In the war room, Billy delivered his report to General Ironside and the Earth Defense Council. The news hit like a physical blow. "With a fleet that size, they'll overrun us in days," one council member said, his voice quavering. As arguments broke out, voices rising in fear and desperation, Billy stepped forward. "I have a plan," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "It's risky as hell, but it might be our only shot." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the battle-scarred Marine. General Ironside nodded for Billy to continue. "We can't beat them in a straight fight," Billy said, "but if we hit them where they least expect it, we might just have a chance." As Billy laid out his audacious strategy, he could see the mixture of hope and doubt in the eyes of Earth's leaders. They knew the stakes. The very survival of the human race hung in the balance. "It's insane," General Ironside said at last. "But insane might be exactly what we need right now." The council chamber buzzed with tense energy as Earth's fate balanced on a knife's edge. The Andorian armada was coming. The clock was ticking, and humanity's last desperate gamble was about to unfold. Billy stood before Earth's leaders, his battle-worn face etched with grim purpose. "We can't beat them ship to ship," he said, his voice carrying through the hushed war room. "But we can cut off the head of the snake." General Ironside leaned forward, skepticism clear in his weathered features. "What are you proposing, Commander?" "We infiltrate the Andorian flagship and capture Emperor Zorath himself," Billy replied, laying out the intel they'd gathered at such cost. "It's risky as hell, but it's our only shot at buying Earth some time." Murmurs rippled through the assembled leaders. Ironside's brow furrowed. It's suicide, Ward. You'd never make it past their defenses. But as the dire reality of Earth's situation sank in, even the hardened general couldn't deny the desperate need for a game changer. With reluctant nods, the council approved the mission. Billy wasted no time assembling his team. He found Mad Dog in the barracks, cleaning his rifle with meticulous care. "I need you for one last op," Billy said. "It's a one-way ticket." Mad Dog's scarred face split into a fierce grin. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, boss." Days later, their captured Andorian freighter docked with the massive dreadnought World Cracker. Billy's heart pounded as they passed through security checkpoints, praying their disguises would hold. They slipped into the bowels of the ship, biding their time. When the moment came, all hell broke loose. Alarms blared as Billy's team fought their way through corridors awash in pulsing red emergency lights. Plasma bolts sizzled past, leaving scorch marks on metal walls. The acrid stench of ozone filled the air. Billy and Mad Dog burst into the throne room, weapons at the ready. There sat Emperor Zorath, resplendent in gleaming armor, and beside him, a familiar face twisted with hatred, Commander Boron. "You!" Boron snarled, drawing his sidearm. The room exploded into chaos. Billy dove for cover as Andorian guards opened fire. Mad Dog's rifle barked, downing 2 aliens in quick succession. Zorath bellowed orders, his own guards turning on Boron even as they fought the humans. Billy spotted an opening and charged Boron, tackling the Andorian to the ground. They grappled furiously, trading vicious blows. Billy's fist connected with Boron's jaw, stunning him momentarily. Scrambling to his feet, Billy found himself face to face with Emperor Zorath. The Andorian's eyes blazed with contempt. "You dare invade my ship, human vermin?" he spat. "I will crush your pathetic species beneath my heel." Rage boiled through Billy's veins. With a roar, he lunged at Zorath. The two leaders clashed in a furious exchange of blows. Billy's human agility gave him an edge against the larger Andorian, allowing him to duck under a wild swing and land a crushing uppercut. Just as Billy was about to subdue the Emperor, white-hot pain lanced through his side. He stumbled, seeing Boron's triumphant sneer as the Andorian commander withdrew a bloodied blade. "Billy!" Mad Dog's voice cut through the din. In a blur of motion, the grizzled Marine hurled himself at Boron. The two went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling dangerously close to an open maintenance hatch. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Billy seized his opportunity. He tackled Zorath, pinning the Emperor's arms behind his back. "It's over," Billy growled. A scream of rage drew his attention back to Mad Dog and Boron. His friend had the upper hand, but Billy could see the blood seeping from multiple wounds. With a final Herculean effort, Mad Dog heaved Boron's broken body into the open hatch. The Andorian's howl was cut short as he plummeted into the ship's reactor core. Alarms shrieked as the dreadnought shuddered. "Reactor breach imminent," an emotionless voice announced over the ship's comm system. "We need to move," Billy shouted, hauling Zorath to his feet. He keyed his radio, contacting the Earth fleet. "This is Commander Ward. We have Zorath. I repeat, we have the Emperor." As they fought their way back through waves of Andorian defenders, Billy used Zorath as a shield. "Call off your attack," he snarled at the captive Emperor, "or you go down with this ship." Zorath's eyes bulged with impotent rage, but he complied. The Andorian fleet held position, giving Earth's battered forces a chance to regroup. The World Cracker's superstructure groaned as Billy and his team raced for their escape craft. They barely cleared the docking bay when the reactor went critical. The massive dreadnought split apart in a blinding flash, the shockwave buffeting their small ship. As they limped back to Earth, Billy stared at the chained form of Emperor Zorath. For the first time since this war began, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. They'd bloodied the Andorian's nose and bought Earth precious time. But Billy knew the real fight was nowhere near the end. As they prepared Earth's defenses for the inevitable counterattack, he couldn't shake the feeling that the coming battle would decide the fate of humanity itself. Billy's eyes scanned the tactical display, his heart pounding as he watched the chaos unfold. The bridge of the Deathbringer hummed with alien tech, now under human control. He turned to Mad Dog, who stood at his side, laser rifle at the ready. "Launch the drones," Billy ordered. Mad Dog nodded, his scarred face set in concentration as he input commands. Seconds later, a swarm of sleek, metallic spheres poured from the Deathbringer's launch tubes. They zipped through space, latching onto nearby Andorian ships. Alarms blared across the enemy fleet as systems went haywire. Lights flickered, weapons misfired, and engines sputtered. Billy seized the moment, his hands flying over the alien controls. "All batteries, fire!" he shouted. The Deathbringer's massive guns roared to life, spitting superheated plasma at the nearest Andorian cruiser. The ship's shields buckled under the unexpected assault from one of their own. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as it listed to port, venting atmosphere and debris. Across the Andorian formation, similar scenes played out. Human strike teams, using stolen command codes and intimate knowledge of Andorian weaknesses, wreaked havoc. Ships turned on each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe. Billy's comm crackled. "Ward, this is Ironside. We're moving in. Give 'em hell." The human fleet dropped out of warp, a ragtag collection of battered warships and retrofitted civilian vessels. They formed up into a tight spearhead formation, engines blazing as they plunged into the heart of the Andorian armada. "Now!" Billy yelled. He swung the Deathbringer around, bringing its guns to bear on the largest concentration of enemy ships. Other commandeered vessels followed suit, their combined firepower tearing through the disorganized Andorian center. Space lit up with the flash of explosions and the crisscrossing beams of energy weapons. Fighters swarmed like angry insects, human and Andorian craft locked in a deadly dance, the void filled with expanding clouds of debris and bodies. On the Deathbringer's bridge, Billy fought to keep his footing as the ship shuddered under return fire. He saw Mad Dog stumble, a gash opening on his forehead as he slammed into a console. "You okay?" Billy called out. Mad Dog wiped blood from his eyes, grinning fiercely. "Never better, boss. Let's fry these bastards." Billy nodded, turning back to the tactical display. He watched as Ironside's fleet punched through the Andorian line, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. But the humans paid a heavy price. Ship after ship winked out on Billy's screen, overwhelmed by superior numbers. Just when it seemed the tide might turn against them, Billy received another transmission from Ironside. The general's voice was grim but triumphant. "Package delivered, Ward. Get our people out of there." Billy's eyes widened as he realized what Ironside meant. The bioweapon. He keyed his comm, broadcasting on all frequencies. "All strike teams, fall back to extraction points immediately. I repeat, fall back now." He watched the tactical display, counting the seconds as human transponders blinked out, indicating successful extractions. When the last one vanished, Billy allowed himself a small smile. "Time to go, Mad Dog," he said. They raced through the Deathbringer's corridors, laser fire from the remaining Andorian crew nipping at their heels. They reached their docking port, just as the first reports of a strange illness began flooding the ship's communications. As their shuttle broke away from the dying flagship, Billy caught a glimpse of the carnage they'd wrought. The once mighty Andorian armada was in shambles, hundreds of ships drifting powerless or tearing themselves apart in their death throes. The human fleet made the jump to warp, narrowly escaping the grasping tendrils of Andorian pursuit craft. As the stars stretched into lines around them, Billy slumped in his seat, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He knew the fight was far from finished. The Andorians would regroup, would seek vengeance for this humiliation. But for now, humanity had bought itself time and hope. Billy Ward stood before the assembled human colony leaders, his eyes scanning the room. The air crackled with tension as he laid out his audacious plan. "We've bloodied their nose," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "But the Andorians will regroup. We need to strike hard and fast before they can recover." General Ironside nodded grimly. "What do you propose, Commander?" Billy activated a holographic display, revealing schematics of an alien research facility. We capture their top scientists, force them to give us an edge that can win this war. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A colonial governor spoke up, her voice skeptical. And how do we find these scientists? Billy's gaze fell on the chained form of Emperor Zorath. The Andorian's eyes blazed with hatred as Billy approached. You're going to tell us, Billy said coldly. Zorath spat at Billy's feet. I'll die before I betray my people. Billy leaned in close, his voice low and dangerous. You misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation. Hours later, Billy led his strike team through the swirling gases of the Tartarus Nebula. Their stealth ship, black as space itself, glided silently towards the hidden Andorian station. Approaching outer defense grid, Mad Dog reported from the pilot's seat. Inputting Zorath's codes now. Billy held his breath as they passed through the security perimeter. No alarms sounded. They were in. The team split up once inside, moving swiftly through sterile corridors. Billy's group reached the main laboratory, catching the Andorian scientists by surprise. Nobody move, Billy shouted, his weapon trained on a tall, imperious-looking alien. Archon Rathtak, I presume. The lead scientist sneered. You humans are more foolish than I thought. You'll never leave this station alive. Suddenly, alarms blared. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Andorian death guards poured into the room. Billy dove for cover, shouting into his comm. All teams, fall back to extraction point. Rathtak vanished in the chaos. Billy caught a glimpse of the scientist fleeing down a side corridor. Mad Dog, with me, he yelled, giving chase. They pursued Rathtak through a labyrinth of twisting passageways. The station shook with the sound of distant explosions as the battle raged. Billy rounded a corner and found himself face to face with Rathtak in a massive chamber dominated by a pulsing reactor core. The scientist's hands flew over a control panel. Stop! Billy shouted, realizing too late what was happening. Rathtak grinned malevolently. You've lost, human. This reactor will tear a hole in space-time itself. Your fleet, my station, this entire sector, all will be consumed. Billy's mind raced. He keyed his comm. All units, evacuate immediately. Get clear of the station. What about you, boss? Mad Dog's voice crackled over the link. I'm going to shut this thing down, Billy replied. Go, that's an order. He turned back to Rathtak, raising his weapon. You're going to help me stop this. The scientist laughed. I think not. A squad of death guards burst into the chamber. Billy dove behind a control bank as plasma fire filled the air. He returned fire, downing 2 of the alien soldiers. The reactor's hum grew to a deafening roar. Warning klaxons screamed as the containment field began to fail. Billy fought his way to the main control panel, Rathtak's arrogant laughter ringing in his ears. He input command after command, desperately trying to halt the overload. It's over, human, Rathtak taunted. Except your... The scientist's words were cut short as Billy tackled him, pinning him against the console. Stop this now, Billy growled, pressing his weapon to Rathtak's head. Fear finally crept into the Andorian's eyes. His fingers flew over the controls, canceling the overload sequence with seconds to spare. As they raced for the last escape pod, a stray shot caught Billy in the back. He stumbled, shielding Rathtak with his body as they tumbled into the pod. Rathtak stared at the grievously wounded human in disbelief. Why? He asked. Billy coughed, blood speckling his lips. Because every life matters, he gasped. Understanding dawned in the scientist's eyes. I will help you, Rathtak said softly as the pod rocketed away from the dying station. Your courage, I've never seen its like. Darkness closed in around Billy's vision as they sped towards Earth. His last thought before unconsciousness took him was of hope. Hope that this sacrifice might give humanity a fighting chance. Billy Ward stood on the bridge of the Defiance, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the newly constructed warship's sleek profile. The prototype blade drive hummed beneath his feet, a testament to humanity's desperate ingenuity in the face of annihilation. All systems ready, Commander, Mad Dog reported from his station. Crew's as prepared as they'll ever be. Billy nodded, his teeth gritted. Initiate blade jump sequence. The ship's AI chirped in acknowledgement. Billy felt a moment of vertigo as space itself seemed to fold around them. Stars streaked past in a dizzying blur, and then they emerged in the heart of Andorian territory. Corvin Prime loomed before them, its orbital shipyards a glittering web of activity. Weapons hot, Billy barked. Target those defense stations before they can raise the alarm. The Defiance's guns roared to life, spitting lances of energy that sliced through the unprepared Andorian defenses. Explosions blossomed in silence across the planet's orbit. Stations neutralized, Mad Dog reported, a fierce grin on his scarred face. Billy didn't hesitate. Commence full bombardment of the shipyards. Hit them hard and fast. The Defiance unleashed hell. Salvo after salvo of destructive fire rained down on the vital Andorian infrastructure. Massive dry docks crumpled under the assault, half-built warships shattering into clouds of debris. Alarms blared as the enemy scrambled to respond. Swarms of Andorian fighters poured from planetary hangars, racing towards the lone human intruder. Blade jump, Billy ordered. Sector 7 Alpha. Space twisted again. The Defiance vanished, reappearing instantly on the far side of the system. Andorian pursuit craft found themselves firing at empty space. New targets acquired, the tactical officer called out. Shipyard complex in range. Billy nodded grimly. Fire at will. For days, the battle raged across the Corvin system. The Defiance struck like lightning, unleashing devastation before jumping away to safety. Andorian ships gave furious chase, only to find their quarry had already moved on to the next target. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Billy turned to the Andorian scientists they'd coerced into aiding them. Rath-Tak, can we execute a blade jump inside that dry dock? The alien's eyes widened. It's never been attempted, but theoretically possible. Do it, Billy ordered. Space folded once more. They materialized within the massive structure, the Defiance dwarfed by the half-constructed Andorian dreadnoughts surrounding them. All weapons fire, Billy shouted. The ship's guns lit up, tearing through the dry dock at point-blank range. Billy watched in awe as the entire facility began to buckle and tear apart around them. Jump us out, he commanded, heart pounding. They escaped moments before the dry dock imploded, taking the dreadnought with it. As the days wore on, the toll on the Defiance mounted. Crew members were lost to lucky hits or system failures. The ship's hull was scarred and battered, its systems pushed to the breaking point. Commander, Mad Dog's voice was urgent. Massive Andorian fleet incoming. We can't take them all. Billy's mind raced. They'd accomplished their mission, crippling Corvin Prime's shipbuilding capacity and gathering crucial intelligence. But now... Execute emergency blade jump, he ordered. Get us out of here. The Defiance vanished once more, leaving behind a shattered Andorian system and a trail of destruction that would echo across the Empire. Days passed as they drifted, their blade drive overtaxed and life support systems failing. Just as hope began to fade, they stumbled upon an uninhabited rogue planet. Perfect, Billy muttered, studying the barren world. We'll make our stand here. He led a team to the surface, establishing a foothold on this desolate rock deep in enemy territory. As they worked to fortify their position and repair the Defiance, Billy knew the real test was yet to come. The Andorians would stop at nothing to destroy them now. Humanity's fate hung in the balance, and Billy Ward stood at the center of the storm. Billy Ward stood in the command center of the fortified outpost, his eyes scanning the holographic displays that surrounded him. The rogue planet's barren surface stretched out beyond the reinforced walls, a desolate landscape that now served as humanity's last bastion of hope. Status report, he barked, his voice carrying the weight of endless sleepless nights. Mad Dog looked up from his console, dark circles under his eyes. Defiance's repairs are at 87%, Commander. The new shield emitters are online, but we're still working on the starboard weapons array. Billy nodded, his gaze shifting to the Andorian scientist hunched over a workstation. Rathtak, how are those rail cannons coming along? The alien's tentacles twitched with irritation. Your primitive technology is challenging to upgrade, but I've increased their power output by 32%. It should be sufficient to punch through most Andorian cruiser armor. A warning klaxon cut through the air. Billy's head snapped towards the long-range sensor display. What's that? Massive energy signatures, the sensor operator reported, his fingers flying over the controls. Hundreds of ships dropping out of FTL. It's the Andorians, sir. They've found us. Billy's expression resolute. Sound general quarters. All personnel to battle stations. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Billy strode to the main view screen, watching as swarms of Andorian hunter-killer ships filled the sky. Mad Dog, get the Defiance in the air, Billy ordered. I'll coordinate from here. Hit them hard and fast. As Mad Dog raced for the launch bay, Billy turned to the gunnery chief. Power up those rail cannons. Let's give our visitors a warm welcome. The first Andorian ships entered weapons range. Billy watched as lances of superheated plasma erupted from the planetary defense grid, smashing into the incoming vessels. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum of space. Defiance is airborne, Mad Dog's voice crackled over the comm. Ready to engage. Billy's fingers danced over the tactical display. Execute maneuver Epsilon, take out their lead ships. The Defiance vanished in a burst of distorted space-time, reappearing behind a cluster of Andorian cruisers. Its weapons blazed, tearing through the enemy's exposed flanks. For hours, the battle raged. Billy coordinated the defense with surgical precision, using the blade drive's impossible maneuvers to confound and destroy the Andorian attackers. The sky above the outpost became a graveyard of twisted metal and plasma fire. As the last of the enemy ships fled, leaving behind a trail of debris, Billy allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. But he knew this was only the beginning. Days passed as they worked to fortify their position. Billy pored over intercepted Andorian transmissions, his blood running cold at what he discovered. They're coming back, he announced to his assembled officers, and this time they're bringing everything they've got. The long-range sensors lit up like a supernova. Billy stared at the readouts in disbelief. 10,000 Andorian capital ships, led by the infamous High Admiral Torkin himself. We can't fight that, Mad Dog said, his voice hoarse. Not head on. Billy's mind raced. No, we can't, but we can make them fight on our terms. He outlined his plan, a series of lightning-fast strikes using the blade drive to cripple the Andorian supply lines. It was insanely risky, but it was their only chance. For weeks, the Defiance jumped across star systems, leaving devastation in its wake. They hit fuel depots, munitions factories, and communication relays. But Torkan's juggernaut pressed on, inexorable in its approach. As the first Andorian ships entered orbit, raining death upon the outpost's outer defenses, Billy knew it was time for his last attempt. He strode into the biolab, where Rathtak worked feverishly over a sealed containment unit. Is it ready? Billy asked, his voice tight with tension. Rathtak's eyes gleamed with a mixture of fear and scientific fascination. It is. But this virus, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The mutagenic potential is off the charts. Billy nodded grimly. Loaded into the missile warheads. We launch as soon as their ground forces deploy. As the Andorian dropships descended through the atmosphere, Billy gave the order. Missiles streaked skyward, detonating in clouds of microscopic death among the landing zones. The results were swift and horrifying. Andorian soldiers collapsed, their bodies twisting and dissolving as the Torkin strain ravaged them from within. Billy watched the carnage unfold on his monitors, his face a mask of steel. Sir, a panicked voice called out. Andorian forces have breached the inner perimeter? Billy's eyes narrowed. It was time for the endgame. Prepare for emergency blade jump. Target Torkan's flagship. The Defiance materialized in the heart of the Andorian fleet, unleashing its lethal payload directly into the enemy command ship. Billy watched as the bioweapon spread like wildfire through the tightly packed armada. Andorian ships began to flee, their crews succumbing to the unstoppable virus. Billy sagged against his command chair, exhaustion finally overtaking him as the immediate threat receded. He gazed out at the stars, knowing that the war had entered a new phase. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity's future hung in the balance. Billy Ward stood in the shattered command center of the Defiance, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the aftermath of their bold strategy. The once bustling sectors of Andorian space now lay silent, a gaping void where countless stars once shone. "Status report," he croaked, his voice raw from hours of shouting orders. Mad Dog limped to his side, blood caking the side of his face. "We're alive somehow, but the ship's barely holding together. Half the crew is dead or injured." Billy nodded, his mind racing. "And the Torkin strain?" "Eradicated," a weak voice answered. Billy turned to see Rathtak slumped against a console, the alien skin pale and mottled. The pulse, it worked. But the cost... Before Billy could respond, the long-range communications array crackled to life. General Ironside's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mix of awe and horror. "Ward, what in God's name have you done?" the general demanded. Billy straightened, meeting Ironside's gaze. "What was necessary, sir? The virus is contained, and the Andorian threat has been neutralized." "Neutralized?" Ironside barked a harsh laugh. "You've carved a wound in the galaxy itself. Our long-range sensors are going haywire. The fabric of space-time is fluctuating in ways we've never seen before." As if to punctuate the general's words, the ship shuddered. Billy grabbed a nearby railing to steady himself. "Sir," he said, "we need to focus on the immediate situation. The Andorians are in full retreat," Ironside cut him off. "What's left of their fleet is scattering to the far reaches of known space. But that's not our biggest concern right now." The general's image flickered, replaced by a star chart. At its center, a pulsing anomaly grew, tendrils of impossible energy reaching out across light years. "That," Ironside said, "is what's left of Nexus Ultima. Our scientists are calling it a black holographic matrix. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered." Billy leaned closer, studying the swirling vortex of data. "What does it mean?" "It means," Rathtak rasped, pulling himself to his feet, "that we've unlocked secrets of the universe itself. The fundamental forces behind subspace, they're all there, encoded in that singularity." Ironside nodded grimly. "And it's not just us who've noticed. We're picking up transmissions from a dozen alien civilizations we've never even heard of before. They're all converging on that sector of space." Billy felt a chill run down his spine. "So we've won the war, only to start an even bigger one?" "Not necessarily," Ironside said. "The galactic community seems hesitant. Your actions have demonstrated humanity's willingness to unleash unimaginable destruction. They're calling for talks, negotiation." "Negotiation?" Mad Dog spat. "After everything they've done to us?" Billy raised a hand, silencing his friend. "It's a start. We've shown them what we're capable of. Now we need to show them we can be reasonable too." Ironside nodded. "Exactly. I'm ordering the Defiance to make for the rendezvous coordinates I'm transmitting now. You'll represent humanity in the initial talks." As the general's image faded, Billy turned to survey his battered crew. They'd fought and bled and sacrificed everything to reach this point. Now, they faced an even greater challenge, forging a lasting peace in a galaxy forever changed by their actions. "You heard the man," Billy said, straightening his torn uniform. "Let's go make history. Again." The Defiance's engines sputtered to life, propelling the battle-scarred ship towards an uncertain future. Behind them, the cosmic scar left by their bold strategy pulsed with unknowable power, a testament to humanity's potential for creation and destruction. Destruction. The cosmic scar pulsed with unknowable power, a testament to humanity's potential for creation and annihilation. Billy stared at the holographic display, his eyes tracing the jagged edges of the abyssal rift. The million-light-year gash stretched across the galaxy, a void of nothingness where countless stars once shone. At its heart, the remnants of Nexus Ultima twisted and writhed, a decaying artifact of unimaginable power. "Commander," a voice called out. Billy turned to see Lieutenant Chen, her face gaunt and eyes hollow. "The latest reports from the outer sectors are in." Billy nodded, bracing himself for more bad news. "Go ahead." Chen's fingers danced across her datapad. "The subspace shockwave continues to destabilize hyperlanes. We've lost contact with the Orion arm entirely. It's like someone took a knife to the fabric of space-time itself." Billy's eyebrows furrowed as he processed the information. The rift hadn't just destroyed star systems, it had shattered the very foundations of interstellar civilization. A commotion outside drew his attention. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, Billy watched as a group of soldiers argued, their voices muffled, but their anger palpable. "Another desertion attempt?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Chen nodded grimly. "Third one this week. Morale is, well, you can see for yourself." Billy stepped out onto the observation deck, the acrid air stinging his lungs. The once bustling outpost now felt like a ghost town. Soldiers moved listlessly between buildings, their eyes downcast and shoulders slumped. In the distance, massive energy signatures flared at the edge of the rift. Billy squinted, making out the silhouettes of warships locked in combat. "Andorian warlords," he muttered, fighting over scraps of their dead empire. A heavy hand fell on Billy's shoulder. He turned to see General Ironside, the older man's face etched with lines of exhaustion and regret. "We need to talk, Ward," Ironside said, his voice low and tight. Billy followed the general to a secluded corner of the deck. Ironside's eyes darted around, ensuring they were alone before he spoke. "This can't go on," Ironside hissed. "Look at what we've done. We're not saviors. We're butchers. The entire galaxy will remember us as monsters." Billy's fists clenched at his sides. "We did what we had to do to survive. The Andorians would have—" "Enough!" Ironside cut him off. "It's over. We've won, if you can call this winning. But at what cost? We need to sue for peace, try to salvage what's left of humanity's soul." Before Billy could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. He rushed back to the command center where Chen was frantically working her console. "Multiple ships dropping out of FTL," she reported. It's our own people. They're leaving." Billy watched in stunned silence as nearly a third of their remaining fleet vanished into the void, fleeing the horrors they'd wrought. In that moment, the weight of their actions crashed down upon him. The rift hadn't just torn apart the galaxy, it had shattered the very spirit of those who created it. Billy slumped into his chair, suddenly feeling every sleepless night, an impossible decision of the past months. He looked up at the worried faces of his remaining officers and made the hardest choice of his life. "Prepare for evacuation," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're abandoning the outpost." The next days passed in a blur of feverish activity. As Billy oversaw the preparations, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running not just from their enemies, but from the consequences of their own actions. On the final day, Billy led a small group across the barren wastes of their temporary home. Twin suns beat down on them as they trudged through irradiated sands, their footsteps leaving no trace in the ever-shifting dunes. Billy looked back at the ramshackle collection of survivors. Men and women who had once stood tall now shuffled forward with vacant eyes, their souls as empty as the void they'd created. As they boarded the last transport, Billy caught a glimpse of his reflection in a battered hull plate. He barely recognized the man staring back at him, gaunt, haunted, a shadow of his former self. The ship's engines roared to life, carrying them away from the ruins of their Pyrrhic victory. Billy watched through a viewport as the outpost receded, swallowed by the vastness of space. They were heading into the unknown, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed by their defiance. But as the stars streaked past, Billy couldn't help but wonder if they were fleeing not towards salvation, but deeper into the abyss of their own making. The transport ship pushed onward, carrying the last remnants of humanity into the dark.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.